Hi there. Today I want to talk about how to find your soulmate, the one, Mr. Right, Miss Right, that significant relationship that you've really been looking for. Tell you some stories. A story from my own life, how I met my wife, and tell you a story from a client of mine's life, and pass along a couple of books. Recommend a couple of books to help you, discover the key to finding the one. My name is Jay Eaker, and I'm, coming to you from the BioSoul Integration Center here in Louisville, Colorado. And I feel like my job here is to help you embody your soul's gifts, so that you can, express those gifts through your body, through your physical body, onto this physical plane, so you can give your gifts, live your purpose here on the planet. And there's a level of life satisfaction, a level of fulfillment that comes from that's above and beyond the sort of surface level of happiness that people experience when they just have enough money and have basically satisfying relationships and have feel they're relatively healthy. There's a certain level of happiness that comes with that, but I think a lot of people want more, and there is a certain level of fulfillment, a certain level of life satisfaction that comes from really embodying your soul's gifts and serving others with those gifts. So if you could, to that extent, to that end, if you could like this video, if you could subscribe to my YouTube channel, share it with anyone who you think might be interested on social media or wherever you do your social stuff. And if you could do that, especially subscribe to my channel, that'd be really much appreciated. So the romantic relationship, love relationship, it's probably the thing that is the biggest facilitator of our spiritual growth. There are a few big ones. There's our family, there's like your career, your work world. They're sort of big containers for our growth. But I think a sort of love relationship is the biggest one. I mean, I'd call it a crucible for growth, for spiritual growth. A crucible is that little container. I don't know if you did a high school chemistry or a college chemistry. It's like this little porcelain container, and you put ingredients in there, and then you can torch them with that blowtorch thing, and it doesn't harm the crucible. You can heat things up and make new things out of it. I think it's a term that applies to life, in that it's just a container for things to happen, that the end result is that sort of something new is created in us or in our lives. It's a crucible. And certainly that love relationship is a crucible for our own growth. And the reason that is because of the way it reflects our shadow back to us, or it reflects back to us this, parts of ourselves that we maybe are not so apt to, that we're maybe not so apt to express, the parts of ourselves that we don't like, and just other unconscious, our unconscious shadow material. The love relationship is really good at reflecting that stuff back to us, to a certain degree. So are the other things, our family, our work relationship. But the truth is, you can sort of, when your shadow starts coming to the surface in those relationships, you can get out. You can leave. You can go somewhere else. You can leave your family. You can, kind of hold tight until work's over, and then you can sort of like let loose, and be by yourself. But with a love relationship, it's generally at some point it's not possible. We do everything with them. We live with them. We sleep with them. We get up with them. We brush our teeth with them. All of that stuff. So they get to see our worst and our best and our worst, and they reflect that back to us. And so it becomes impossible to sort of keep the energy, the resources that we're using to sort of hide certain parts of ourselves, it becomes impossible to keep doing that. Those parts come to the surface, and we're forced to see them. What's more, we're forced to put them on display in front of other people. There's no greater expose than that. But on the other hand, ideally, it happens inside of a container of love, right? So we get to see these parts of ourselves, but hopefully in a way we get to learn also to hold them with love, which is kind of a recipe for serious transformation. So, I mean, the question kind of is like, are you feel like you're ready to do that? Or are you, are you looking for a relationship to validate your self-worth? Are you looking for a relationship to complete you on some level? If you are, you're going to have to, you'll be faced with that stuff when you come in a relationship. And maybe you've been trying to call in the one, but you're not having much luck. Well, in anything in life that we want, there's a combination of a few things that kind of place us where we are in life, and those things are like what we come in with. There's material, that we come in, that comes through our lineage, work that we're sort of required to do when we get here, that comes through our lineage, that comes through past lives, if you believe in that stuff. Then there's also what happens to us while we're here. There's the hurts and traumas and accidents. There's just the way that our primitive survival nervous system entrained to the people in our world when we're in the womb and when we're, a kid. We just adopt their patterns, our family's patterns, the culture's patterns. And then there's hurts and traumas and accidents that we experience that sort of impact us as far as a relationship might go. And then there is timing. The universe, life has its own timing. It's trying to, I believe anyway, in my experience, it's trying to align things that in a way that's good for all, for the good of all. And, I think that we have to wait for that. And so you can't really control timing, right? But you can control the stuff you came in with and the stuff that you encountered while you're here. In that, you can work on that stuff, your personal growth. And I believe that stuff is all designed to some degree when we bring our attention to it, our kind attention to it. There's that container again, looking at a thing from the perspective of your heart, the energy that's bound up in our system as a result of the hurts and traumas and accidents, that's transmuted into fuel for our healing, into rocket fuel that sort of can propel us to the upper limits of what's possible for our bodies and our lives. And, to the extent that we're doing that work, when the timing piece happens, when those things converge, it can create this sort of magical situation. Magic that's sort of reminiscent of things that happen in the movies. They always say, like, as far as a relationship goes, like, you shouldn't, use movies as your reference point for what love is supposed to look like. But in this case, I think there is a certain way when those things converge, it can be pretty magical. So again, you can't control the timing, but you can control your personal work, the degree to which you are working with what you've been given. I want to share a story from my own life. I want you to pay attention to the sort of the rhythms, the things the themes that happen as I tell this story. I'm going to tell a story about one of my clients too, and similarly, there may be similar themes. I met a woman, this is before I met my wife. I've been with my wife like 7 years now, and this was sort of long before that, 5 years, 6 years before that maybe, so like 13 years ago, I met a woman, and it was kind of the first adult relationship I'd had, I guess. It was the first grown-up relationship that I'd had. She was an adult woman who was a therapist and had a certain level of skills around communication, and knew herself well, not someone to be toyed with in any boyish way. This was a first sort of adult relationship, and we kind of had the honeymoon stage like everyone does at first, and we were sort of getting closer together through that. And then, things like kind of didn't, I thought this was going in the direction of what I was sort of used to. It's like, you spend a certain amount of time together, and then, you're in a relationship with someone, and it's just you and them. They're committed in a sort of committed relationship with you. But there was a way in which she just didn't seem like she just didn't want to settle in, into relationship with me on a certain level. She wanted to kind of stay above, wasn't ready for some reason to sort of commit to this relationship. And that started to, bug me. And I was always trying to get her to sort of like commit to this relationship. But the truth is, there was some way in which she was, the truth is there was a way in which I needed her. She was a pretty cool lady. She still is. If you're watching this, you know who you are, and I love you. We, still have there's lots of love there. But I was relying on some level on her to validate my self-worth. Being in a relationship with her, was the thing I was using to validate my own self-worth. And, I think that she could feel that. And consequently, she couldn't sort of like settle into relationship with me because she could feel how I was relying on her for that. I wasn't solid in myself, And there were ways in which I was, so I was just constantly trying to get her, and trying to figure out, because I wasn't sort of solid in my own self-worth, I was constantly trying to figure out, well, what's wrong with me? How can I change to get her to sort of commit, basically? And that's never going to work, And so eventually we ended up sort of like separating. It eventually ended up not working. The truth is, I think I was just, got to a certain point, freaked out that I couldn't, make this happen, and kind of had a few glasses of wine and got belligerent on a phone call with her, and just, she just saw the ways in which I was not, sort of expressed the ways in which I was not ready, and she was gone. And so there were a few years there where she was in other relationships and I was in some relationships, and then I think a couple years went by and we sort of like reconnected again. And we were at this healing seminar together. It's these transformational gates. Donald Epstein and the Network Chiropractic work that is the foundation for the work that I'm doing here. He holds these events called transformational gates where a bunch of people come together to do that work, and we were at this thing together, and I was getting worked on by this practitioner, and I experienced this sort of like this way in which suddenly there was like life force energy flooding into a part of my upper lungs that I had clearly pushed life force energy away from. And I was like coughing and coughing and coughing. It was like clear, like this part of me had been opened up. And later on that day, I was having a conversation, maybe we were in our room together, and she said something, and it was like, there it is again. It was like, I just want, some compassion from you, or I want something from you, and I just sort of saw it. Suddenly I had this awareness that I was looking to her to sort of like complete me in some way. I was looking to her to supply something that I couldn't supply for myself. And in seeing that, I sort of had compassion from this part of myself suddenly. I realized that if anyone was going to give this part of me compassion, it needed to be me. And so I just started crying, and there was, bawling, tears, snot, just, full out bawling, and just sort of like sobbing, and just realized in that process I was sort of giving this part of me compassion, and I was sort of seeing like, oh wow, I see how I was expecting you to do that for me, and that's just not gonna happen, So I had this realization, and we were sort of trying out the relationship again, it seemed. But I kept hearing this later on, after this seminar, but I kept hearing the same things from her. She kind of just didn't want to settle into a relationship with me. And she was saying things like, why don't we see other people? And before, that is something that would have just sent me, like, oh, how can I, gosh, so annoying. How can I, change myself so that she'll, be in relationship with me alone? But this time, and send me into some sort of a tailspin. But this time she said that, and I was like, yeah, like, yeah, I'm pretty cool. I'm not a terrible guy. Like, there's got to be someone out there who wants to be in a relationship with me. And so, I was like, yeah, okay. Yeah, let's date other people. Maybe I'll try that option, since seeing as how I haven't really, tried that, settled into that with her, with you for a long, long time. Let's give that a try, And it was kind of really interesting. As soon as I said that and agreed to that, it was like everywhere I tried, some sort of window, this magical window. So there are sort of like themes that have, through this story that I'm telling you, there's a way in which I was stuck, ways in which I was sort of seeing the same thing over and over again, ways in which I gave myself compassion that I couldn't give myself before, ways in which in this, what I'm just telling you, that I reclaimed my power, and then this magic window opened up, and it was like everywhere I turned there was some attractive, available woman, looking at me hungrily. It was, from a guy's perspective, it was really amazing. It was like I couldn't go anywhere without running into some, amazing, available woman. Also, all of the other possibilities were swirling. All of the other people that I had gone out with, in this sort of interim period before, after I had broken up with this woman I was mentioning, and before we kind of got back together with, all of those women were kind of, I would run into them and kind of magically run into them. And it was like I was having, all the choices, all the potential choices were swirling, and I could choose, like, do I want this? Do I want this? Do I want this? Does this feel right? And the truth is that I was ready. I felt like I was ready now to meet my soulmate, ready for the one, And so I could have had relationships with a number of women, but I didn't get into those relationships because I was looking for a certain thing. And along came this one woman, and who was my wife, my wife now, and she said the thing. It was like our souls had agreed that she was gonna say, when she comes along at the right time, that she was gonna say some key word, and she said that word, and it was like something clicked in me, it just felt right. And I was like, this is it. And as soon as that happened, it was like this window closed. I stopped running into all these available women. It was like the window had closed, and it just was clear to me, like, this is the one. And, that was, I guess, long story short, that was 7 years ago. And certainly I've been forced, and still am being forced, to face my shadow more than ever, through this relationship. But I think my work It's a good example of how this kind of work can help you prepare yourself, help you heal the stuff that we come in with. And when the timing piece happens and those things line up, this, magic, synchronistic, it's like life has sparklies on the edges of it. And it was really this 2-week window before I met my wife was really like that. I want to tell a story. One of my clients, she, this is like the one big thing in her life. Like, she wants to get in that relationship. She wants to meet her soulmate. She wants to meet the one. And that's sort of the big theme. And, she'd been in care here for a little while. We're sort of coaching her on connecting. There's some ways in which some of the dark stuff was coming to the surface. It was revealing some of the ways in which she, maybe there was some sense of feeling alone. I don't know, her dad had passed away a few years ago, and she's kind of recognized ways in which she was, doing her best to sort of deal with that, in ways that she had sort of pushed that grief maybe away, and coming into relationship with some of that stuff. And then she got into a relationship, and it was a long distance relationship. Whenever that happens, I kind of always, judgment on my part. I'm sure there's long distance relationships that have worked out great, but I always feel like, yeah, if you're in is that really what you want? Or is you just kind of like settling for this long distance relationship? And sure enough, it didn't work out. I think, he ditched on the relationship. And so here she was having to go through this feeling of like, is it me? Am I, what's wrong with me sort of thing? And I coached her to, bring her attention to the feeling of the sensation in her body of what's wrong with me. I would say life brings this stuff up so that we can, if you're called in the one, if you sort of like planted that flag, if you plant a flag for anything, any sort of flag that you plant about something that you want in life, life is going to be like, all right, great, let's do that. But it means that you're going to have to become someone else. You don't have that thing right now that you want because you're not the person who can receive it. So you have to become the person who can receive that. And that means you have to feel certain things, a wider range of emotions. You have to, come into relationship with parts of yourself that you've pushed away. And life goes about bringing that stuff into consciousness. The things that we encounter, the people we meet are designed to bring that into consciousness. So she met this guy and it didn't work out, and here she comes into a relationship with a part of herself that thinks that there's something wrong with her. And my advice and what I was doing here with her was to help her feel the sensation of that. Every moment that you're able to sort of just be present with the sensation of it, you're integrating. Your heart is opening to a part of yourself that you've been pushing away. In that process, that kind of evolves. It connects us with, there might be some anger that arises, It's the leading edge of the energy that gives us the oomph to reclaim our power. She reclaimed some of her power. She drew a new boundary like, hey, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm a pretty cool person, just like I had done. And the next thing you know, she's on some dating app and she's just flooded with dates. The next thing you know, all she's doing is going on dates for a period of time. And she meets someone, and it seemed like it's going, it's like going pretty good. It's going pretty well. I talked to her. She's like, yeah, I think we're like really ready to sort of, sink into the next level. And here it is right now. It's just after Valentine's Day. It'd been months, I suppose, that she'd been in this relationship with this guy. And then he sends her a text saying that he's not into it anymore. And, right around Valentine's Day. So, like, what a, to be judgmental, I don't know what's going on his end, but seriously, what a kind of a loser move. But, here she is again. She kind of like let her heart open, and she let herself feel into the possibility of this love, the soulmate relationship, and felt like it was going that way, but boom, crashed. and of course brought up a lot of grief, brought up a lot of confusion. And she was telling a story about how she was in the airport and she got this text. And there was the moment where she could have closed her heart down. She could have said, "What's wrong with me?" You know? And in that moment, we're closing our heart down to a part of ourselves. But, you know, something in her, I like to think, having to do with the work that we did, something in her was like, no, I'm going to keep my heart open. And I'm going to give myself permission to feel all of this stuff. And she said that, you know, she just had a really profound healing experience there in the airport. You know, obviously there was tears, there sobbing, probably other things like anger, but, you know, she was feeling things and coming into relationship with parts of herself that she previously had pushed away. So, you know, when you seriously plant that flag, life is gonna say, okay, let's do this, but it's gonna start helping to turn you into the person that you need to turn into to have that thing. And often along the way, that, you know, part of that is sort of getting clearer on what you want and what you don't want. Just saying that you want to meet the man of your dreams or the woman of your dreams is not quite specific enough. Along the way, there's a good chance you're going to learn, like, oh, there were signs here, like this client of mine, you know, there were signs, but that I wasn't listening to, that I was, you know, settling for some behavior in hindsight. And the next time around, you're not going to do that. You're going to honor yourself more. You're going to claim more. So it's a, you know, it can be a trial and error process. So again, I wanted to sort of point out that there are certain stages in this process of healing that happens that are sort of common to everyone's experience, that are sort of reproducible through work like this, and reproducible and sort of predictable, and they unfold in a natural way when we commit to bringing our attention, our kind attention, you know, to ourselves. And there's a book that I was going to bring with me here that I didn't, but that's the 12 Stages of Healing. That is a book by Donald Epstein, the guy that created Network Care, and he just kind of broke down these different stages of the healing process that happen as people as their evolution unfolds. And it's very useful as a reference to sort of check in with what, you know, where you are on in the process. And it's designed to help you, really, not so that you can achieve some higher level of healing, but so that you can help you, you know, dial in on where you are right now, because the present moment is always where the key to healing, that's where the key to finding the one is. It's in the present moment and what's happening with you in the present moment. Another book, excuse me, that became really a crucial book at about this time with this relationship that I was talking about in my life was a book called The Way of the Superior Man by David Deida. And it's basically a book that, you know, the title would make you think that it's only for men, but it's not really. It basically tells you how it tells a man how he would be if he was sort of like centered in himself, if he was strong and connected to himself. But consequently, because it talks a lot about the masculine and feminine, that there's a lot in there for women. And in fact, this woman that I had been in a relationship with, she had read it, and it really, you know, was impactful for her, and she sort of gave it to me, sort of like, here, please read this book. And so The Way of the Superior Man, you know, in the end, a friend of mine and I, we were trying to figure out relationship, and we were both reading this book, The Way of the Superior Man, and we were sort of like, all right, here's a situation, you know, with our woman, like, what would David Deida do? You know, and we would try to sort of like do the thing that David Deida said to do in his book, but which never really quite worked out, because again, it's really about being centered in yourself. It wasn't until after the fact, after I sort of did some more healing, that I could sort of look back and in you know, circumstances and situations now where I could see like, oh yeah, like naturally, if you're centered in yourself, if you're connected to yourself, if you love yourself, if you know, yeah, that you will behave a certain way, that you hold a certain ground in honoring the parts of you that have needs, and yeah, you just hold a certain ground in yourself. So in the end, I did, you know, end up understanding what that book was about. But at the time, you know, what would David Data do? Didn't quite work. In any case, you know, again, just doing your work, doing your personal work, your spiritual growth work, embodying your soul's essence. The work that I'm doing, work like this can certainly help, but there's other things out there that help you do that. And you know, that sort of converge with timing, and it's totally possible to find your soulmate, totally possible to find the one. If that's really, really, really what you want, life will sort of, you know, conspire to make that happen for you. So I hope this video has been useful. Please like it, share it, subscribe to my YouTube channel or anywhere else that you see this or hear it, on my podcast, my BioSoul Integration podcast, or other social media sites. And I look forward to helping you express more life in the future. Have a great day.